This isn't a running ad from REI, because it's mostly walking and occasionally flying. It's hitting your favorite trail with your favorite people who showed up for the same unhinged reason. And it's not just about fastest known times, but finding the funnest times. Because this isn't running, it's trail running. Get your gear for the trail in-store or at rei.com.
This one goes out to all my ladies, all my multitasking mamas who need energy to show up at work and at home. All my empty nest explorers who need a little gut health support for the journey ahead. AG1 is the daily health drink designed to support whole body health with over 75 essential nutrients and pre- and probiotics. So you can make the most of every day and every decade. Learn more at drinkag1.com.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about when you micromanage your partner, you are not allowing yourself to ever get used to them doing anything. So you are perpetuating your anxiety that they're going to disappoint you, and you're not allowing yourself to really engage in the exposure therapy that you need for your anxiety. And this is really related to the most recent subscriber episode, Make Decisions in the Home. Because these two kinds of people are often codependent with each other. The one that won't make any decisions, as in my most recent subscriber episode, and this kind of person that makes all of the decisions compulsively. So make sure that you subscribe so you understand kind of the full dynamic here and not just this piece of it. And of course, you get over 230 other episodes if you subscribe. Okay, so anxiety responds really well to exposure therapy, which I talk about all the time, which is basically putting yourself in the feared situation and then seeing that you don't die and that you survive and that in fact your anxiety does not stay forever at the same peak level. It is a bell curve. It is the shape of a normal distribution. Your anxiety peaks and then it decreases. But most people get out of the feared situation before they see that their anxiety will in fact abate. I used to work with veterans at the VA in Charleston for PTSD, and we would do imaginal exposures, which helps with flashbacks. And it's the same sort of thing. They feel that if they really recount the memory, if they really talk about the memory, the combat-related memory in those cases, then it will become intolerable. They'll go out of their mind. They won't be able to deal with the anxiety of it. But when you never process those memories, they keep coming back in nightmares and in these, intrusive thoughts, right? And if you can actually get through talking about them, you will see that eventually, not on the first telling, but maybe on the second telling, your anxiety will start to go down. No person can stay at the same level of anxiety forever. That would not be adaptive. People would not be made that way, right? Because you would be paralyzed with fear. And that would not allow you to survive. You need to be able to get over fear as a human. And so it's the same kind of thing with people that are very stuck on overfunctioning, and that if things aren't done their way, then everything will go to shit and nobody will survive and terrible things will happen. So for example, a woman is very scared that her husband will pack the lunches for the kids wrong, and the kids won't have the right lunch, and they won't have enough food, and they won't have a healthy lunch, and they won't feel loved because it'll be put together and not the right way, or what have you. Plenty of people who micromanage, they have these ideas that there will be a terrible, catastrophic, or irreparable, or just like super upsetting thing that will happen. And these are the same people that are very scared of negative emotions. I did another recent podcast about that, about when people cannot tolerate their kids or their partner's negative emotions, so therefore they overfunction. So in this case, the woman would think that the child would be unable to deal with being hungry one day at school and then coming home and saying, I didn't have enough lunch, I need 2 sandwiches next time instead of 1 sandwich, for example, right? And that's not true. Right? Because imagine your kid just spilled their drink on their sandwich. they would live. Imagine shit that happened with you as a kid. Didn't you sometimes not like your lunch? Didn't you sometimes want to play instead of eat lunch? Didn't you sometimes lose whatever snack you had? You took it out, somebody took it, or somebody wanted it, or you ended up sharing too much. You survived, right? But still, you would not have the respect. So you wouldn't respect your kid enough, because that's really how your kid takes it. Over time, they start to feel like mom or dad doesn't respect me enough to know how to deal with something, even though you don't intend it like that. But anyway, so this woman in this theoretical example, which I do see in my office, would micromanage how the guy makes the lunches. And so she ends up having to do everything. So she makes dinner, she does the cleaning, all of this he's offering to help. He never does it right. So then he says, I'll make the lunches. And she says, you can't, you don't do it right. And only if you do it exactly the way that I say can it happen. And so sometimes he'll try to do it exactly the way she says. And sometimes he says, fuck it, like I know how to make a lunch, because also he doesn't feel respected in that situation, right? And so then she ends up saying, I have to do everything. But the reality is she is not allowing herself to basically do an exposure therapy for her anxiety. So if he didn't do the lunch right, as I said before, if there wasn't enough food, the child would be able to come home and say, I need more food. If it wasn't healthy food, nobody's going to die, right? She could take it over on her days and do healthy food. When it's that, honestly, this is why y'all should be in therapy, because a therapist could be like, okay, well, what about she picks out what goes into it, and that's all that's in the house. Most guys will be like, okay, like literally, that's the end of that discussion. You know, if there's not junk food in the house, he doesn't have junk food to give, whatever the case may be. But this can be done. Sometimes a couples therapist is really just like a thinking partner and can really help you guys come up with solutions when you're too stuck in the moment to figure them out. But the point is, no matter how he packs the lunch, he's going to go to school and she's going to see that over the course of the day, she isn't so upset. Nobody calls from school, right? She forgets about it at a certain point. She does whatever else she has to do, whether that's work or home stuff or whatever, and she's able to survive it. So then she has basically done exposure therapy on her own for the anxiety that him packing the lunch is going to be terrible. And there's plenty of guys who overfunction micromanage too. I hear that all the time. You know, it's not as often as women in the home, but it's with other things too, like such as the finances. Like if she takes over paying this bill, where we're going to get the light, the power is going to go out because she's so ADHD, she's so all over the place, she could never manage that. Right? So the woman asks basically, oh, like, can I take over this or that? Because the guy's always acting super stressed. Remember, if you don't believe that there are these kind of guys, there are. And you could go back to my recent podcast and also the one, are there men that do everything? There are men that are super overfunctioners. The woman has ADHD, depression, anxiety, whatever it is. It was also on my one, it's not a sex issue, it's an adulting issue. That was really recent. So if you don't think there's guys who do everything, listen to that one. And if you are one, listen to those. So sometimes the guy will not give anything over to her. He won't let her drive because she'll get into an accident. He will because she thinks she's a bad driver. Meanwhile, she's never gotten in an accident, or she does as much as anybody else, you know? And he won't let her manage the bills. He won't even let her do the cooking or the cleaning because it frustrates her. So he won't allow her to have that level of frustration. He won't let her sit there and be like, oh, I don't know what we should have for dinner, you know, because he thinks, she's getting upset, you know, and that's intolerable for him. And he doesn't feel like he'd be able to deal with that. It's like I have this post that everybody likes so much, stop caring so much what your wife thinks. And the guys that are obsessed with making their wife happy, it's because they cannot tolerate an unhappy woman. Usually it relates to their own family of origin. Usually their mother was very angry or depressed. And so they feel that they would never be able to tolerate her sitting there getting frustrated at cooking, which of course she would need to do in order to learn how to cook if she doesn't cook. Right? So then if the guy were to let that woman who doesn't necessarily like to cook, but who has said, you know, I really wish that I was contributing more, because there are plenty of people who say that. I talk about this a lot with the stop taking everything off your wife's plate, you know, and assuming then she's going to be happy or have sex all the time. The more you take off somebody's plate, the less useful they feel, the less of a healthy sense of self-efficacy they feel. So if that guy were to let his wife cook dinner, right, and tolerate the distress that she may feel as she's learning how to do that, then that's exposure therapy for his fear that he will not be able to tolerate her negative emotion. right? Because that's at core what all of this is. The woman in the first example fears that she would not be able to concentrate all day if the kid had a bad lunch, or that the kid would be traumatized from having a bad lunch, and that would be her fault. A lot of this stuff is linked in with OCD, overfunctioning, and it's a lot from being an underprotected child, that turns into an overprotective parent, as I say. I didn't come up with that, but I love it, right? And it's important to recognize that your fear, just like the guys that I used to treat with PTSD, with combat-related PTSD, the veterans, they feared that they would not be able to tolerate recounting that memory, that they would go crazy, that they would just short circuit somehow. But they didn't. They sat there and we were in the room together and they went through one memory at a time, just from the beginning to the end. And then they would rate their anxiety. Where's your anxiety now? 1 to 10. Starts out at a 9 or a 10, even just knowing that they're going to recount it and tell it to me, right? And then about 10 minutes through, and they go really slow and they talk about all of the things they smelled, the things that they felt, the temperature, just as much description as possible. And then by the end of that, maybe it's at a 7. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's at a 9. But I'll tell you, never in all of doing that did anybody's, after retelling it over and over, did the anxiety not go down. It has to go down. You get bored. There's a habituation. Even the most traumatic memory, if you said it in some Twilight Zone-esque way, if you were forced to tell it over and over 100 times in a row straight, don't you see that at the end, of course, it would just be this horrible, boring, terrible thing. You want to go pee, you want to go on with your life, you're hungry, and that memory would have lost its traumatic impact. And this exposure therapy principle happens with all anxiety. The more you do something, the more you put yourself into the feared situation, the more you see that it's just a thing. It's just a thing that you can get through. If you practice putting yourself in these challenging situations, which in this case, what I'm talking about is this micromanagement. If you stop yourself from micromanaging, because really, by the way, the full name of exposure therapy is exposure therapy with response prevention. So the response that you usually do to escape or avoid the feared stimulus, you prevent yourself from doing that. So usually, the man would start to pack the lunch. The woman's anxiety starts to go up as she's watching him. She starts to micromanage it. And then eventually she takes it over either by telling him, forget it, you go. That's her response, right? Or she makes him just act as her hands, which means that he's just an extension of her and she's not working on her anxiety at all because she's not giving over any of the control. He feels micromanaged and she never gets to work on her anxiety that if the child has a subpar lunch, then he's going to die, right? And that she's going to not be able to tolerate the anxiety of knowing that he might have a subpar lunch. So these responses are prevented. The man who's so anxious that his wife cooking dinner, it's going to go so terribly, somehow she's going to blame him. They're going to have a huge fight. He's a bad husband because he's letting her do something she doesn't like. She's going to cry. Whatever his thing is, he's got to go out of the room and prevent himself from jumping in and rescuing her from that situation by micromanaging dinner forever, which then doesn't allow her to actually be a real person. Same as the guy packing lunch. He doesn't get to be a real father with a thought of what should I pack for lunch? Oh, okay. And understand the kid and what the kid eats. And then the kid could have a great lunch when dad does it, right? And then he would not have that experience if he were prevented from ever packing lunch in his way. Then if the kid says, I liked my lunch, then dad doesn't even feel good about it because all he was being is a pair of hands for mom. That's not a way to have a loving and equal and respectful marriage, is for one person to do all the decision making. Because then whenever anything goes well, it's always that person, the CEO, that has to be thanked. And you can refer also to my podcast episode on the CEO and the employee dynamic, right? Because that's what that becomes. That isn't good. So we want two people able to make decisions. So listen to this. Obviously, you just did. Listen to my previous subscriber-only podcast episode. And if this is something that you struggle with, this micromanagement on one side and the abdication of decision-making on the other side, and those are codependent, right? So you can't have one without the other. Usually you do not have people wrestling for power after their 30s, right? in their 40s, people just they have less energy, they have less desire for conflict or ability to navigate the conflict. So the same couple that'll have a power struggle in their 30s, by their 40s, the guy's like, fuck it, man. You just want me to make whatever lunch you want. I'll do it. I don't give a shit. And he emotionally withdraws while she tells him exactly what to do. Or in the other case, the woman is like, you know what? He doesn't want me to cook. He seems scared if I cook. I don't know how to cook, so I'm just never going to learn how to cook. Let him make every meal. I don't care, And so even though that makes her feel lower self-esteem and she thinks of him more as a parent than a partner, she doesn't have the energy anymore to object. So if you want to work on this stuff, then you're already past... Well, I mean, if you're in the power struggle phase, obviously couples therapy is useful too. But also if you're in the stage of resignation, sometimes you need a couples therapist to kind of come in and stir the pot a little bit and get you guys to look at some of these dynamics that are very dysfunctional before they just perpetuate forever, right? And then one person just micromanages the other, hugely anxious, unable to see that a lot of this stuff doesn't matter at all. And the other one just turns into a robot, a slave robot that does everything, or does nothing. In the case of the woman not allowed to make dinner, just somebody who is just passively makes no decisions, does no activities. Neither one is a healthy template for your kids to observe, that's for sure. All right, thanks for listening, guys, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day.